Hey everyone! Hopefully all of you out there who are playing a Boomie noticed that we have 2 damage over time spells in our arsenal, or dots for short. The first one is Moonfire, and the second one is Insect Swarm. In phase 1, Insect Swarm was our bread and butter, and Moonfire wasn't used at all, but it was mostly because of mana issues. In phase 2, we were not only trying to keep Insect Swarm at max uptime, but it was somewhat worth it to even multidot if you had like the 4-piece tier 8 gear. And Moonfire was used only before Lunar Eclipse, so the rotation was slightly more complex. However, Phase 3 again brings something new to the table, and this is making us to basically shift from Insect Swarm to Moonfire pretty much. But that's not all. You should also change Glyph when you meet certain gear requirements. In certain conditions, it's worth to even multidot with Moonfire. And as you progress with your gear, you're shifting from keeping Insect Swarm at max uptime to almost not using it at all, while even the Insect Swarm maximize setting on Sim really isn't even maximized at all, as one would think. So this can all be very confusing. That's why I want to talk about today how exactly we should use our dots in phase 3 in order to maximize our DPS. So let's get into it and make a few scenarios. Scenario number 1. Let's imagine you are ending phase 2 like majority of Boomies with your 4-piece tier 8, Idol of Shooting Stars, and your glyphs probably look something like Starfall, Starfire and Insect Swarm. As you can see from the sims I've done a while ago, in the video phase 3 Balance Druid BIS List and other changes, which I'm linking in the description by the way down below, while you are still in this gear setup, nothing changes to the phase 2 rotation, meaning you still keep Insect Swarm at max uptime and use Moonfire before Lunar Eclipse. This gives you the most DPS on single target. Regarding multidotting, it might be worth it to multidot Insect Swarm if there are more targets to proc the 4-piece tier 8 instant Starfire more often, but I wasn't utilizing this much as this brings another tier of complexity to the rotation, so I used this strategy mostly on Mimiron, Freya or Kologarn while I had to move. And for the settings in Sims, Insect Swarm maximize, yes, it is exactly like you are imagining, keeping it as much as possible, meaning you are refreshing it even in Lunar Eclipse if it falls off. Scenario number 2. You can actually buy the new idol as one of the first upgrades of phase 3 while still having your 4-piece tier 8. It is a DPS increase and that's what I was doing the first reset of ToGC, so let's make this as a scenario number 2. So you have your 4-piece tier 8, the new idol of Lunar Fury, and it's still worth it to run Starfall, Starfire and Insect Swarm, not switching to Glyph of Moonfire yet. So while having this setup, it's pretty much similar to the first scenario. The only exception is with the new idol, it's worth to keep Moonfire at max uptime instead of only using it before Lunar, and this is because of the 200 critical strike rating which you want to keep up. Nothing else pretty much changes. Which brings us to scenario number 3, where there are some major changes happening to our dots. After 2 weeks of ToGC, this is currently relevant for many players, and myself included, as this is exactly my gear setup at the moment. So imagine you have your 2-piece tier 9 already and was able to buy the new Idol of Lunar Fury as well. This is the threshold where it's worth it to change your glyph, specifically you want to swap Glyph of Insect Swarm for Glyph of Moonfire. And by the way, if you are wondering why the DPS values on the sheet are a bit lower, it's because I was still using gtmoniq pack value of 450 back then instead of 500 as it's mostly used now in the sims. So on single target, keeping both of our dots up as much as possible is the way to go and can dish out the most DPS. However, you want to prioritize Moonfire because of the idle crit rating and the 2-piece tier 9. One more thing here that is kinda changing and is a bit misleading is having the Insect Swarm at max. When you set maximize for Insect Swarm on Sims, it's not really maximized as I figured out with the help of the big brains on Druid Discord. I didn't quite understand at first and didn't seem very logical to me. I mean, like, how is this even possible? Like, when keeping both of them at max is the best, which is completely fine, don't get me wrong, and I don't have problem with that. But if they should be up at all time, and that's the best DPS, meaning you are refreshing Insect Swarm even during your Lunar, wasting a global cooldown that could have been a Starfire, and this way it's still dishing out the most DPS, then how the hell doing Insect Swarm just before Solar can be worse than not doing any Insect Swarm at all, when I should keep it at max for most DPS? So this is what I was confused about, and we found out that while outside of 4-piece tier rate, Insect Swarm maximized on the sim isn't really maximized, because it is not refreshing Insect Swarm during Lunar Eclipse. This was done only if you had 4-piece tier 8 because of the instant Starfire proc. So now you might ask, what is the difference then between maximize and before solar setting on sims? And that would be a great question. Seems like the only difference is that the before solar setting is not refreshing Insect Swarm during solar eclipse, while maximize does. But I'm not gonna bother you with details anymore. Long story short, while having 2-piece tier 9, Idol of Lunar Fury and Glyph of Moonfire, the best DPS on single target is keeping Moonfire all the time while letting it fall off before reapplying, and same applies for Insect Swarm, however, do not refresh Insect Swarm while Lunar Eclipse. You can Insect Swarm on pool, you can refresh before Solar, you can refresh during Solar, you can refresh before Lunar, but don't refresh during Lunar Eclipse. Now, if there are more targets, you are now multidoting with Moonfire instead of Insect Swarm, and this is actually really worth doing and is a pure flat DPS increase. And how much of a DPS increase the Moonfire multidoting is? Let's see. As you can see, this is my current gear setup at the moment after 2 resets. So let's sim this on single target and save it as reference. There we go. And let's add an extra target. New target. What's happening? Okay, it's there. So you can imagine it's gonna be like Drag Scale and Acid Mo in ToGC. Actually, what I want to do is save this as a reference because it's a flat DPS increase just because of the Starfall on 2 targets now. So let's save it as reference and let's change the settings of Moonfire now to multidot. So it's not going to be only on 1 target, but it's going to be multidotting now, meaning it will want to keep up on both targets. So let's sim it now. Yeah, and as you can see, if the encounter would last 180 seconds and you will multidot Moonfire on both targets, you will gain around 236 DPS compared to just single target nuke with passive Starfall Cliff. Now let's imagine there are even more targets, like the ads on Anub, for example, Anubarak. So we have 5 targets, let's sim this, and keeping it up on 5 targets with, for example, when the duration will last 180 seconds, means almost 2000 DPS increase. So it's well worth it to do. Like, however, only multi-dot if the target is gonna survive the whole duration of the dot. If you want to be really sweaty and you are not afraid to add an extra layer of complexity to your rotation, you can also utilize Moonfire extending while multidotting, which is when you extend the Moonfire on main target with free Starfire cast after using Moonfire on another target. I'm not gonna explain this any further, like make sure to check out Go's video who did a great job explaining this mechanic in more detail, so link it down below in the description. In the fourth and last scenario, imagine the phase 3 is almost over and you are sitting in your best in slot gear. As you progress with your gear, Insect Swarm is losing its value a bit, so when you get to a certain gear threshold, suddenly there's a tiny DPS increase in not using Insect Swarm at all, or using it only on movement. As you can see on the sheet, the DPS difference between Moonfire Max Insect Swarm Max and Moonfire Max Insect Swarm Unused is very small. However, DPS increase is an DPS increase, so if you want to min-max and dish out the most DPS, consider skipping Insect Swarm altogether on single target. There are no changes on multiple targets compared to previous scenario, you still multidot with Moonfire and passive clip with Starfall. So what's the conclusion? Keep in mind though that the Moonfire max Insect Swarm max in scenario number 3 is purely from a min-maxing point of view, and the DPS gain out of it with perfect play is not marginal. So if this causes you to make mistakes in your rotation, consider using just Moonfire, as this feels way easier and you will eventually skip the Insect Swarm anyway. So it's completely fine. Basically anything that does your rotation more comfortable will give you more damage at the end of the day. I advise you to check the sims on your own for your gear setup to figure out when is the time to stop using Insect Swarm. It is possible that you can cross the line before you are full biz actually, mainly if you are gearing towards haste rating. Seems like crit rating favors the Insect Swarm, but spell power and haste favors no Insect Swarm, while the 600 haste rating might be the threshold according to the Druid Discord, and thanks for the brains out there, linking the Druid Discord in the description as well. This is pretty much it for today. Hopefully this was useful for someone. And if you like the content, consider subscribing and liking the video. Thank you and keep pumping.